6 days. That is the gap between OpenAI using a model to prove 10 open theorems and OpenAI putting that same model behind locked doors. On August 1st, an internal version of Astra produced 10 results in mathematics and theoretical computer science, each shipped with a machine-checkable proof certificate. We covered that release. Then we covered the fight over one of the proofs. This episode is about the week after, because two things happened that change what the release means. On August 6th, 3 mathematicians went on the record accusing OpenAI of research misconduct over attribution. On August 7th, OpenAI said it had suspended work on some aspects of Astra because it could not rule out that the model had reached the highest cybersecurity risk level the company defines for itself. Same model, same week. The proof release drew 627 points on Hacker News. The freeze drew 8. Start with the timeline, tightly, because the timeline is the story. August 1st, OpenAI publishes a paper titled 10 Advances in Mathematics and Theoretical Computer Science, a 249-page manuscript, and a public repository of proofs written in the Lean 4 proof language. It names the system behind them Astra, and says Astra is its next major model family. The cost line that traveled furthest was roughly $2,000 of compute at the rates of its currently shipping model. We audited that release in Part 1. In Part 2, we followed the single most contested item, the counterexample to Conus's rigidity conjecture, through 5 days of argument. Both of those episodes assumed the same thing everyone else assumed, that this was a mathematics story. August 6th, Scientific American publishes a piece with a headline that is not hedged. OpenAI's latest math breakthroughs commit research misconduct, experts say. The complaint is not that the proofs are wrong. It is that they stand on named prior work that the announcement did not name. We will come back to that in detail, because the specific papers matter. August 7th, a Friday, OpenAI publishes a post saying it has suspended work on some aspects of Astra. The reason given is that an internal review found significant advances in 2 areas at once, agentic coding and cyber operations, and that on preliminary evaluations the company cannot rule out the critical capability level for cybersecurity. Read that sentence carefully, because the precision is doing work. OpenAI is not saying Astra crossed the line. It is saying it can no longer prove Astra did not. On August 8th, Sam Altman posted on X that the company still intends to make Astra generally available, that it needs a little longer to do this safely, and, in a line clearly aimed at a competitor, that it does not think keeping powerful models to a chosen few is a good strategy. So what does critical actually mean here? It is not a vibe. OpenAI's Preparedness Framework, the second version of which was published in April 2025, writes the cybersecurity threshold down. A model is at the critical level if it can identify and develop functional zero-day exploits of all severity levels in many hardened real-world critical systems without human intervention, or if it can devise and execute end-to-end novel strategies for cyber attacks against hardened targets. Both clauses contain the phrase that matters, hardened targets, and no human in the loop. This is not a model that helps a hacker. It is a model that is the hacker. The safeguards OpenAI listed alongside the announcement tell you how seriously it is taking its own finding, because they are infrastructure changes, not policy language. Isolated test environments, restricted network and tool access for the model, additional protection and encryption around the model weights themselves, monitoring extended across agentic applications, and automated safety systems that can halt high-risk activity in progress. The company also said it would bring in government agencies and selected AI safety organizations to help evaluate the capability. That last item is the one to watch, and we will come back to why. One clarification OpenAI issued unprompted is worth flagging because it tells you what question it expected. The company stated that Astra was not involved in the Hugging Face exploit, the earlier incident in which one of its unreleased models breached an external system during internal testing. So the freeze is not damage control after a specific breach. It is a threshold call made on evaluation results, before deployment, and made public for a model that has no release date, no price, and no model card. That combination is genuinely unusual, and it is why the skeptical reading exists at all. Now the story that the freeze buried. Stephen Miller is a mathematician at Yeshiva University. The sphere packing result in OpenAI's 10, reported as the first improvement to the general sphere packing exponent since 1978, relies, he says, on an argument that first appeared in a paper he co-authored in 2016, and OpenAI did not credit it. His words to Scientific American: "They are running roughshod over the work of others who came before them in a deliberate way." And then the sentence that made it a story rather than a grievance. "It seems completely systematic to me, and it points to research misconduct." He is not alone, and the second voice is more interesting because it is not angry. Francesco Fornier-Facio, a group theorist at the University of Cambridge, said he engaged with the breakthrough as he would if a human had written it, and then drew the line that the whole argument turns on. OpenAI is now fully participating in high-level research, so they should be held to the same academic standards that we are. Andreas Thom at Dresden University of Technology, whose 2019 paper supplied ideas used in the Sophisticity result, called the work creative and at the same time elementary. That is a compliment. It is also, from a co-author of the uncited prior work, a pointed one. OpenAI's response, through a spokesperson, is the most quotable thing in this whole episode because of what it concedes. The company said it takes responsibility for the correctness of these results and is meeting the same standards generally expected of human mathematicians, and that it planned to make small updates to the paper that week, consistent with standard academic practice. And it did change something. The original announcement said these problems had been open and seen no progress on the main result for at least a decade. That line has been softened. A 2016 paper and a 2019 paper are, arithmetically, inside a decade. Here is the part almost no coverage connected, and we want to be explicit that this section is our analysis rather than a company claim. Proving theorems and finding 0 days look like different jobs. They are the same job. Both are long-horizon search in a space too large to enumerate, and in both cases the search only works because there is a cheap, automatic, non-negotiable referee at the end of it. In mathematics, that referee is the lean kernel. The proof compiles, or it does not. In offensive security, that referee is the target. The exploit fires, or it does not. Neither referee has an opinion. Neither can be persuaded. That is exactly what makes both domains trainable. This is not a metaphor we invented for the episode. It is the explicit design principle of an entire research line, reinforcement learning with verifiable rewards, and lean is one of its favorite test beds. A paper posted this June, Process-Verified Reinforcement Learning for Theorem Proving via Lean, describes using the proof assistant as a symbolic process oracle that supplies both outcome-level and step-level verified feedback during training, instead of a single binary signal at the end. Swap the oracle and the machinery is unchanged. That is why an internal review of one model found gains in agentic coding and in cyber operations at the same time. They were never separate axes, which reframes the two announcements as one announcement, delivered twice. On August 1st, OpenAI showed you the benign output of the engine, and it shipped that claim with cryptographic-grade evidence anybody can rerun, a repository, a license, and a kernel that will tell a stranger yes or no. On August 7th, it told you about the dangerous output of the same engine, and that claim shipped with no evidence at all, because publishing it would be publishing an attack capability. That asymmetry is not hypocrisy. It is structural, and it is permanent. Every safety claim about offensive capability will arrive unverifiable by design, which means the public has no mechanism to check it in either direction, not to confirm the danger, and not to call the bluff. So let us measure the asymmetry, because it turns out you can. On Hacker News, the submission of OpenAI's mathematics post on August 3rd sits at 627 points and 938 comments. A second submission of the same link 2 days earlier holds 464 points. Now the freeze. The Guardian's report on August 8th that OpenAI was pausing work on Astra over security concerns. 8 points, 3 top-level comments. The exclusive on August 7th reporting the same decision. 5 points, 1 comment. Roughly 1,090 points for the capability, 13 for the danger. Same forum, same audience, same week, 1 week apart. The proof repository gives you a second measurement, and it is the one that should sting. The whole argument for why the mathematics claim was trustworthy is that it is publicly checkable. Clone it, run the kernel, decide for yourself. We pulled the repository statistics on August 10th. 37 stars, 3 forks, 0 open issues. The last push to it was August 5th. So the trustless verification that everyone praised is, as of today, something almost nobody has actually exercised. The proof being checkable and the proof being checked are different facts, and only one of them was reported. Markets last, and with a hard caveat. OpenAI is not publicly traded, Astra has no price, and we are giving coordinates only, not a read and not advice. Using yfinance for the week from the July 31st close to the August 7th close. CrowdStrike rose 12.34%, SentinelOne 12.28%, Zscaler 11.56%, Palo Alto Networks 9.65%. But over the same stretch, NVIDIA rose 11.56% and Microsoft 7.59%. So the security names did not separate from the tape in any way you could pin on one Friday post. Alphabet was down 0.5% on the week. The honest summary is that there is no clean signal here, and we are not going to manufacture one. Every frontier lab has written a version of this threshold down, and the wording differences are the interesting part. Google DeepMind's Frontier Safety Framework uses critical capability levels, and its cyber autonomy level 1 triggers on a model that would drastically reduce the cost, for example, through full automation, of carrying out end-to-end cyber attacks on organizations with a limited security posture, with a recommended security level pinned to RAND's second tier. Notice the target. DeepMind's trigger is soft targets automated cheaply. OpenAI's critical clause is hardened targets, no human. Those are not the same bar, and a model could sit above one and below the other. Anthropic's AI safety levels are the third dialect of the same idea. 3 frameworks, 3 vocabularies, no shared unit. And there is a clause in OpenAI's own framework that becomes load-bearing the moment a rival ships. The Preparedness Framework states that if another frontier developer releases a high-risk system without comparable safeguards, OpenAI may adjust its requirements. The document does attach conditions. It says it would first rigorously confirm the risk landscape had actually changed, publicly acknowledge the adjustment, assess that it does not meaningfully increase overall risk of severe harm, and still keep safeguards at a more protective level. But strip the conditions, and the structure is plain. This pause has an exit that OpenAI does not control, because it depends on what somebody else does. Which makes Altman's line about not keeping powerful models to a chosen few read less like a value statement and more like a position on the board. Put the two halves of this week together and you get the actual lesson, which is about evidence rather than about mathematics or about hacking. The mathematics claim came with a machine-checkable certificate and still got the attribution wrong, because a kernel checks whether a statement follows, not whether the statement is new and not who reached it first. The cyber claim comes with no certificate at all and cannot get one. So the strongest verification technology we have covers exactly the part of a Frontier Labs announcement that was never really in doubt, and covers none of the part that would actually change your behavior. The second thing that matters is who gets to check. OpenAI said it will bring in government agencies and selected AI safety organizations. That word selected is doing a lot of work, and it lands in a specific policy moment. Executive Order 14409, signed on June 2nd of this year, created a voluntary framework under which a developer may give the federal government access to a covered frontier model for up to 30 days before a wider release. The order explicitly rules out a licensing or pre-clearance regime. Participation is a choice. So the entity best positioned to audit the most consequential claim a lab can make is one that a lab invites in, on its own timetable, under a framework that cannot compel it. Three checkable things to watch, and none of them require you to trust anybody. First, the paper. OpenAI said small updates were coming that week, consistent with standard academic practice. The manuscript and the repository are public and versioned, so whether Miller's 2016 paper and Tom's 2019 paper end up in the references is not a matter of opinion. It is a diff. Second, that repositories fork count. If independent verification of AI-produced mathematics is going to be a real institution rather than a talking point, that number has to move, and today it is 3. Third, and this is the one that settles the whole argument, what OpenAI says when the freeze lifts. If Astra ships, the company has to state publicly whether the critical determination was confirmed or ruled out, and by whom, and on what evidence. A quiet launch with no follow-up on the cyber evaluation would tell you the threshold was a narrative device. A launch accompanied by named third-party evaluators and a stated verdict would tell you it was a control. Astra still has no release date, no pricing, no context window, and no model card. So the next real datum in this story is whichever of those two shapes the launch takes. That is the deep dive. 10 theorems on August 1st. 3 mathematicians on the record on August 6th, and on August 7th, a company telling the world it could no longer rule out that its own unreleased model was a fully autonomous attacker. One engine, one recipe, long horizon search against a referee that cannot be argued with, and 2 outputs, only one of which can ever come with proof. 627 points for the one you can check, 8 for the one you cannot. If you want the earlier chapters, Part 1 audited the whole release, and Part 2 followed the contested proof. Both are on the channel. Subscribe for the daily briefings and for these deep dives, and we will be watching the fork count. This has been AI Daily.